this is our inaugural episode.
It's happening, isn't it?
It's really happening.
So with that said, well, with that, I want to introduce everybody to the Webflow Show. The only show that takes Webflow seriously and pretty much nothing else, like you saw with that random cold opening that we had for you. Let's introduce these two clowns that are on your screen right now. Right, so starting with me, I'm Hien, like the ketchup without the Z.
And I'm Matt. We run a Webflow design studio called Huck Finch. We specialize usually in working with tech companies to help create websites that scale and grow as much as they do. Now that we have the intros out of the way, let's break down how this show is actually going to work.
I was working in the lab late one night when my eyes beheld the eerie sight. For my monster from his slab began to rise, and suddenly to my surprise, he did the mash! He did the monster mash.
So we're going to have a main topic in each episode. We're going to call it the main event. These topics will range in deep dives from landing page design or best practices that help you get the most out of your Webflow site post-launch. It could
be anything.
Anything.
Yeah, it can be anything. So, but with that said, like we will pay special attention to the comments. So if you have any ideas for stuff in Webflow that we should cover or non-Webflow stuff we should cover, like our favorite dinosaurs, feel free to drop them in there. In addition to the main event, we have what we call the opening a can. It could be an opening a can of whoop ass because we are just hot about something, or it could be opening a can to celebrate because we're like super stoked about something. So it's just it's a way for us to keep ourselves on track and giving us a space to go off the rails because you got two wild cards up on screen here who can just say and do whatever. Finally, we have what we call nugs, and it's basically our parting nugs of wisdom to have you take what matters into your own hands. So it's basically the too long didn't read part. So if you're going to skip anything, just go ahead and skip to the very end to the nugs. Swear to God. So if you're feeling the vibes, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe for future shows, and make sure you never miss out on the most fun you could possibly have. With that said, let's go ahead and start the show. So today we're going to share 3 reasons why companies are packing their bags and moving to Webflow, and also share a few cases on when you probably shouldn't. And unless you've been living under a rock, you know that Webflow is a thing. Need proof? Cue the name drop.
We got Dell.
Boom.
We got Upwork.
Boom.
We got Zendesk.
Boom.
We've got Rakuten, which I say wrong. I might not even be saying that right, but it's a big deal, I promise. And that's just a few.
I'm going to go ahead and say you're saying it right. You're crushing it there. But boom for that one too. So yeah, I mean, these are some big players, and there's a reason why they're all moving to Webflow, either from the custom sites that they build, WordPress, which is thumbs down for us, or in any other platforms that are out there, which is also thumbs down. And the quick and easy answer here is Webflow is just a step forward to building a better, more manageable website. Being that we are a Webflow studio, since you heard from our intro, we've at this point built a bajillion websites and a bajillion one and counting. So we know a thing or two about Webflow and honestly why our clients are moving there. So we're going to share 3 common reasons that pop up and over again like a broken record. So we're going to dive into it now in our main event. So Matt, I'm going to ask you right now, what have you seen as reason number 1 of why brands are moving to Webflow?
Yeah, I mean, for me, like the main reason is to basically make the site more manageable on maybe the marketing or the design team, depending on what you have internally. And essentially another way just to say like, is to take the hassle off some of the internal devs that they often need to tap into. I think the biggest part is helping to close that gap between marketing and design and devs of really making their website get put to work for them. Like so often we will see people come from sites that might be on something like WordPress, for example, and they've just sort of lost control over what their website can do. They're maybe not even sure what it can do. There's all these legacy pieces that have been sort of beaten down, or they're no longer no one's there anymore that's even aware of how it works. The site gets heavier and heavier. And the real frustration is, as the site gets heavier and heavier, it requires more devs to sort of make sure that you don't have this Jenga tower of a website that's going on, where you don't really understand how the left hand works with the right. So it gets heavier and heavier, and you're actually able to do less. And I think that just gets really, really frustrating for brands, and they sort of have to start over from scratch, whether they're moving platform or not. And Webflow really makes it much easier to kind of close that gap and sort of return the power of the website to the marketing and design teams, because so much is possible without those devs. And you can do so much with it and really take back ownership of the website. And that just allows the creativity, I think, obviously come from the design standpoint, it allows the creativity to kind of open back up, instead of just being can we just get a page? Can we just get one page live? I don't even care. We just need to get a form. And I think that's just so frustrating, and rightfully so for marketing teams, right? And then you send that request to a dev team who wishes to God they didn't have this request. They're building a product. They have other things to do. So all these things just kind of add up into frustration and the design and what's possible. So you kind of get you get the minimum back, right? You just sort of are settling for functional at that point. That's really frustrating for brands and for marketing. Your job is to stand out, and you're just rolling out pages that are in a template that look like your competitors almost exactly, or worse, it's just a plain page because that's what your dev team could get out to you. So I think there's lots of reasons, but that's kind of the lump sum of the big frustration I think that we hear a lot. And I think that's also super understandable, where people just don't really have control of what they want to do to make sales, to market, to raise their brand image.
Yeah, definitely taking the hassle off the dev. I think you and I have both heard it way too often when we talk to new leads, that when we ask them who's managing your website now, and they're yeah, one of our developers or the CEO. It's it's the CEO by day, their web developer by night, and we're just sure. No, not like this. Yeah. Not like this.
Yeah. And the reason that happens, right, is that's how it worked when they started, maybe before they hit growth or whatever, but also devs are just really expensive. So you got to find a good dev, even if you have the money to do it, are they going to do a good job? Are they reliable? Should they be working on your product instead of your website? So doing that internally is it's a big ask, because that's such an expensive sort of seat to fill that has a lot of important tasks on their plate.
Yeah. So cool. So reason one is taking hassle off developers. And while Matt's cooking up reason number two, I think this is the perfect time for us to fill in some dead air by thanking this video sponsor. All right, so let's go ahead and cue that sponsored video. Well, I guess we don't have a sponsor for this one. Anyways, if you are interested in sponsoring our videos and filling in this dead air, please reach out.
We are open.
Holler at your boys.
We will sell anything. Probably not WordPress products, but I don't think they're going to be calling us.
Yeah, we might if the money's right, but yeah, most likely not. We'll easily sell out. You could take it, mark our words right now, we'll sell out. But with that said, you've heard from our sponsor today, which is Dead Air, brought to you by Frank Reynolds. We'll move on right into reason number two. So Matt, what's reason number two?
It kind of piggybacks on the first one, but it's such a big portion of this, especially as it pertains to your website. It's really just the ability to empower marketing and design teams. Most designers won't know the first thing about code and development, which sort of immediately creates the friction of here's all this cool stuff in Figma or whatever design tool that you're using. And everyone gets really, really excited about that, but they may not have the full knowledge or certainly that a developer would have of HTML and CSS And JavaScript is a whole other thing about what the site can actually do, like what kind of dev talent you have, what kind of resources and time your dev team has to make these things come to life. And it puts a huge like onus on the designer to just sort of understand things that are normally outside their bounds, even if they have some like core knowledge of this. So even if you get through that design process and that marketing process and you have something like everybody's super excited about, now you shift this big piece onto dev and you hope you get something back in that way. So, you know, you get through a few cycles like that, even if it's not at the company that you're at right now, everyone's sort of like, there's kind of a cloud over the project because you're like, well, let's see what we get back. Usually the first thing you get back is a few emails that are like, we can't really do this because we don't have time, or we don't have the knowledge in this way to make this, you know, specific function happen, or this cool animation happen, or whatever it might be. And it kind of like just, you know, puts you in that position of the other team. You lose excitement. The project might lose momentum. You know, people just start to make things that are down to like the level of what they think is possible, you know, based on past experience type of stuff. In short, like you don't have to settle on those things with Webflow. You get, you know, usually like the compromise is a drag and drop site builder so that you don't have to bother your devs. And again, if you're just like, you can do what those drag and drops do, which kind of sell you the idea that you can build your own website, but you can only build your own website with their specific rules and whatever they thought of when they were making that, right? So they may not know exactly the optimal place for a form or how to integrate with exactly what you need to get to your CRM or whatever. But instead with Webflow, you can just use use the platform. It's a visual designer. You can build it from the ground up. So your designers can pretty much own the whole process from design to dev. So you're not losing, you know, those bits in translation. You're not passing huge work onto your dev team. Maybe even if you need dev, right, they can focus on like the really important dev piece that's some very custom part that you might need. They don't have to deal with all this other stuff because your team can kind of handle that. So it really opens that up. It gets you out of template hell. You can reuse parts that are great, but it's just real code. And Hien, I think that's something we talk about with our clients a lot. It's like, this really is real code. So you can iterate much faster. You're not having to stay inside of a template, even though it might function like one. You can change that template however you want. You're not going to make the rest of your site look weird or sort of trying to put the, you know, square peg in a round hole of your template type of a thing. So it just makes everything faster and easier. And ultimately for marketers, right, the most empowering thing is they can launch campaigns, landing pages specific to what they're learning about from their audiences really, really quickly. And that's the name of the game, right? That's how your website becomes more than just a billboard, you know, that you paid a bunch of people to build. Now you just look at it like, we're going to break this thing. Basically, you know, let's go make a print brochure for a tech company instead of making our website better, just because it's too much of a hassle and you just really don't feel empowered to get these things done.
Yeah, exactly. And I think was reason number one, the big thing there was like the resourcing of a very valuable like resource, right? I just to keep using the same word there, but like devs should be working on the product, especially in tech companies. Like that's their focus. They're really expensive, as you said. And in this case, like I think the empowering the marketing team is like so critically important because this is a marketing website. It should be supporting marketing. And while marketing teams like will have, you know, their full marketing plan and strategy and calendar for the year, things come up all the time. Like we hear this all the time from our clients where they just can never get things up fast enough. They'll find out that their CEO just got asked to be on a podcast, or they're going to be doing a co-webinar with someone and they want to promote it, but they realize the webinar is 3 days from now and it typically takes 5 days to turn around a page, and you're like, well, not promoting this on the website. This isn't happening.
Such a bummer, right? Like that's such a good point on the, like, you know, we just say things like it's easy to launch campaigns, but what we really mean is effectively that scenario you talked about where it's like, you can actually get a page up fast enough that looks great too. It's not just some like weird, you know, unbounced landing page or whatever, kind of product, because you have to use this third party piece just to launch a landing page quickly, right? Like you can get one up that looks just like the rest of your site. It looks beautiful. It follows your brand, everything that you want. Like as soon as you find that out, as soon as you find that like webinar is coming out, and you do what marketing is meant to do, which is like leverage every single piece of content, everything possible, right? Like, especially in this day and age, like you've got to get content out quickly and it needs to be current. And Webflow really opens that up, for marketing teams. And I think, we're not marketers, but you can imagine we kind of experience it too with the teams of like, there's like a little bit more energy now on your team because what you actually want to do is possible. And I think that's sort of an unspoken part that's super exciting, is like just the possibility might allow your internal team to start to like revisit what they can do now. You might be able to get 80 more pieces of content out, or different pieces of content than you were last year, just by way of having Webflow, set up as your platform.
Yeah, I think, I guess I'm more excited and focused on the things that really matter. Like what before felt like a Herculean effort in order to launch a new page, whether it's a landing page or announcing a new person in the C-suite, something, or just any page, honestly, a new service page, even a new product page, new case study. All of that stuff previously would have been a Herculean effort to get done. And that would have just taken up so much time and energy that just basically took them away from really what their job is supposed to be, which is actually the marketing of the brand, marketing the company. Where now with Webflow, essentially, especially if we set it up with a CMS, which is like some real nerd talk there for those who don't know what that is, but we'll get into that some other time, what the CMS is in like Webflow, why we think it's pretty sweet and awesome. Essentially just filling out like a form submission, and within minutes you can have those pages up, you're ready to go. And now you just did the thing that took the least amount of effort, that's going to have a high impact, but now you got to focus on the things that actually, so then you can actually focus on the things that it's really impactful, which is thinking through like, what kind of copy are we putting here? What's the, all that kind of stuff. How are we going to actually promote this thing beyond having this on the site? Because we want to push people back to the site. But yeah, so empowering the marketing and design team is reason number 2. And finally, what is reason number 3?
Yeah, it's like another one we've been hinting on, because all these things should play together. And kind of what we've been talking about is they don't, though, like in reality. And Webflow makes these things actually kind of realign again. So where I'm going with that is like just bridging that direct gap between design and dev. We kind of alluded to it earlier, right? Like you might make a beautiful Figma wireframe, got all the bells and whistles, everything, it's modern. It's everything that you hoped. It's everything that your brand exercise that you went through wanted to aim it at. And then again, you have to pass it over to dev. And it's not just, as designers, like nobody's better at shitting on devs, right, than designers that live in Figma all day. But like it's really puts a lot of onus on devs who oftentimes are not even involved in the design process, because it, again, takes too much time. So not even these technical pieces, but just like things are not meshed together. It's too many parties. Things get too expensive. Your marketing and design is working in this area. Then you have it, then it goes to dev. And then you find out sort of what you did wrong in the design, what's possible. So just trying to translate that design into dev, like that's not the dev's fault, right? It's just you're handing them an enormous amount of work. Hopefully as a designer, you're not going too over the top. But also, it's just very hard to even know how much work you're handing over to dev. So that's what changes the timeline, right, of when these things are possible, because they're like, hey, like we can do this in 3 months if you get rid of this part. But this part alone, is going to take an extra 2 weeks just to like get this done, because we have to test it. It's a custom function. We've got to write JavaScript for this, all these types of things, and what that ends up translating into often is like you kind of get rid of the things that make your site unique to save time, because you need to get the website live first and foremost. So animations, a graphic design or something like that you had big plans for doesn't quite play out like you hoped it. It doesn't have the cool load animation. It's like these things sometimes are superfluous, like to have those types of things, but sometimes they're like the most memorable part of your site, like what's happening above the above the fold in that header, right? So you put a lot of thought into that as a designer, and then find out, it doesn't fit into the template that they had in mind. So like, what are we going to do now? So all these different things can kind of just spawn off in like that's the gap between design and dev, or marketing and design and dev. So now with Webflow, like you're really returning the power to the designers, and they're oftentimes designing, in large part in Webflow, because you can kind of see what's happening. You can see what's possible. You can understand the constraints in real time. So you don't go down the path that you might normally go down just because you don't know. And the same thing could happen if like Hien, let's say you make some wireframes and you hand it over to me, like you had no knowledge of Webflow, right? To be fair, like you might not have any idea of like what Webflow can do. Like we had that happen before. People are just doing wireframes regardless of a platform. And oftentimes what's cool is in Webflow, it's like, we can actually do a lot more with this than you're probably thinking. We could animate this and it's not going to cost you a fortune. It's not going to move the timeline a tremendous amount, right? So there's just so much more that becomes possible because, it's ridiculous to say any platform is sort of limitless in what you can do. That would be like disingenuous, because certainly like there's times where we need to use custom code if you're doing some crazy thing. And that's why, you hire, experts to just focus on those things if that's what you need. But it can do way more than you're expecting. Very, very likely. Like that I think is a fair statement to say, because most of us do. Like we come from WordPress as well. Like we've tried to stand up quick sites for people on Squarespace, and all these things sort of have their merits, but eventually they become a frustration. And that's for us why like we fell in love with Webflow as well, is because we don't have to worry about that gap, and we can bring like our vision of what our websites should look like to life. And things become truly unique in that way. Like people remember us because of like weird little things that we do. We're weird if you haven't got to that point yet, but even if you're a SaaS company, right? Like what might be weird or whatever is really, we just mean to say it's different because you're able to be creative about it. It's like now if you're a blue centric branded SaaS company, you have a lot more tools to use to still look different, even though you might share the same color. You don't have to rebrand. We can do some interesting things on the website that really make your site memorable over somebody that might otherwise be confused because, hey, you guys are using the same Divi template from WordPress. Great template. That's why everybody chooses it, but you kind of are in this box now where you have a problem because, you don't want, that's one way of getting rid of the gap between design and dev. Now it's really not there, right? Unless you're doing something very custom. And again, in which case that's great. That's when you bring devs in, not just to build your website. Certainly not to manage your website, right? Like that gap down the road, even once you get your beautiful site launched, it's like, that's brutal because that gap doesn't just mean creativity. It means time. It means things like you mentioned earlier, Hien, about just like we missed it. We just can't launch. We just can't design and launch a page that quickly. So it's great that you're on that podcast. But we'll have a landing page up next month. Maybe we'll try to do it. It's just sort of like, again, everything's kind of a bummer. That gap causes, kind of takes everything down like 20% of what you can actually do, not just from the visual standpoint, but from the functional side.
Yeah, there's like two scenarios here, right? With like in this world where there is a separate designer and a separate developer. The one scenario is the big one is that like stuff gets lost in translation. You're playing a game of telephone because you have two resources, and then the reality does not meet expectations. It makes me think of all those like baking fails. So go ahead and Google baking fails. They're both hilarious and also things of nightmares. But that's essentially what happens there is that like the reality of the website that you thought you were building will never meet the expectation because like what you had designed as a designer doesn't translate. The other flip side of it is that it does translate, but it's a heavy lift and heavy burden because the amount of time and effort that's required to make sure every part of it is clearly translated, and that the designer has to wireframe every page. They have to write in comments of like, hey, this is the image that we want to use. This should be like this kind of effect. If you hit this thing, it should do this to it. Like, that's a lot that the designer has to do and put in, and the developer has to go and make sure they're doing. Like, it, the more you have to do that, the more likely something's going to be missed. And then you have to do this over and over again until you get that thing up. So those are the two scenarios in this space. But when we can consolidate that down to one person, then we should know what the design that we're developing looks like. And as we work with our clients, we would never design anything in a wireframe or something like that and tell them like, hey, it's going to do this thing, when we know damn sure that there's no real way to do that without really charging them a ton of money, because it's like going to be some heavy custom dev. So we can talk to them in both that way. And we've had conversations with our clients who have worked previously with other designers and come to the realization of like, yeah, we got it. I think the reason why our website sucks because we got a really good designer, but they're not a developer.
Right. Yeah. Well, so it's a cool thing too. It makes me think of like a couple of scenarios where we've had, a lot of this too is like getting the most you can out of your budget, to be able to do this. We talk about the gap. It's a resources gap. It's also a price gap. What can we do for this amount? We've had a couple of cool scenarios lately that I think show like Webflow also helps identify what you need your devs for. So we've kind of like, we won't go into some like deep dive about what this was, but like, we built all the website, like they just really wanted to be on the Webflow platform. We didn't really do a ton of design work different from what they had. They just wanted to get on the platform and then sort of build from there. They have a site, they've been around, they're an established company, et cetera, et cetera. We got to a point they had, kind of very custom piece of how they like presented, their team, their company page, really important to their culture and things like that. So like we could do that and it would be a huge lift and a lot of money for us to redo that. But we just partnered with their devs. We helped them understand what Webflow could do well and where we needed their help. And it kind of helped outline really. And it was like a great experience of they didn't have to pay us or some like external dev to do this. They had some time with their team and they only needed to focus on getting this one thing to work well, right? Right. They didn't have to focus on the entire web project. And maybe that's not possible if they also had to build the website as well, right? Like something's got to go. And even if it's just the timeline, right, it's going to take a lot longer. So there's some cool areas too where Webflow just really helps you identify opportunities to work with devs and they can get in and out and do their ninja stuff. And also in those situations for us, like we do quite a bit of dev work, but in this case, we knew as coming from a designer standpoint, we know enough now via Webflow really over the years to speak to them and get things done more quickly. Like we're not just like, hey, we built this in Figma, good luck. All of our rectangles and squares look like dope. So good luck out there. So I think it helps in those kind of like non-obvious ways as well. Like, those little gaps where you still do need to work with a dev or the client prefers that you work with a dev. You can be very targeted and specific. And because again, Webflow's code, there's really no bounds to what we can do in those situations. And that's super exciting. And it didn't blow their budget out of the water. They still got everything that they needed. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that example like connects all the three things together, right? Because it freed up the devs. They don't have to work on building the website because both of you and I are confident that their devs could easily build a website in Webflow if they wanted to. It just, was that the best use of their time? No, because they should be, working on their stuff that actually, keeps the lights on for their business. It freed up marketing to focus on other things because like they can like now set up this website that does what they need to very quickly, which is a big reason why they wanted to move to Webflow in the first place. And because we consolidated down design and dev, like 99% of it, we were able to kind of tell them like, hey, this is what's possible. This is what's not possible. Like, let's have this conversation strategically to figure this out, and then made the most sense of everything. And then we rolled in, this Delta Force dev team when we needed them for this particular thing, and they knocked it out, and with nothing else to worry about. Yeah.
No, it was really quite fun. Like, it was a knowledge share. It was great. So yeah, that was just like those unintended consequences even of Webflow, that probably wouldn't have been on the show if you asked us 2 months ago or 3 months ago, like, because we hadn't kind of gone through a scenario necessarily like that. But now it's like, well, that was cool. Like, we really were able to do something exciting for them. And, it was an important piece of their sort of brand and culture and their website. So that was cool.
Yeah. And this is like to add on to that, like I think anybody who's ever built a website before, like, has this fear of like, if I touch something, is it going to break something else? Or is there just going to be a shit show of code in the back end for me to look at? Because that's going to, like, have some alchemy that's going to potentially ruin something. And because of the way that we built that site, there was none of those concerns at all. We basically just talked through what we think the solution is, what they needed to do, and they did it. And then that was that. And it didn't affect the site in any way. We didn't have to backtrack anything. We still QA'd everything as we always do, but it just allowed for the development process, the design and development of that website to be so much smoother, and gave everybody a lot more confidence that it was going to be good at the end.
Yeah.
So with that said, those are the 3 reasons why people are moving to Webflow. Again, we're freeing up devs, which is a good thing. We're empowering marketing, also a very good thing. And we are cutting out any the telephone game between design and dev. And as a broken record, another good thing. So we're going to move on to our next segment, which is opening a can. I'm going to open this up to you, Matt. Yeah, pun intended there. I don't know if you heard what I did there, but I'm going to open things up here for you. Like, you got anything? You got a can you want to open up?
For way too long. Like, so like, we kind of hinted at, like, I thought we'd kind of tie a segment together to the last one. We kind of hinted at, like, maybe some reasons you shouldn't do Webflow. So obviously we're very pro Webflow and all those good things. We think for very good, authentic reasons that really help businesses that we work with. But one of the things I think that's frustrating, and this is probably true of any platform, so we can broaden it out for the opening a can segment, but if you're not open-minded enough to learn a new platform, or you don't have time or whatever, it doesn't matter whether you're moving from platform A to platform B or platform A to Webflow. Of course, there's a learning curve. So I'm opening up a can in 2 places, like, even a little bit on Webflow, right? Like, in marketing worlds, like all these places like Squarespace, Webflow, whoever's in this market, right? The marketing it's so easy a monkey could do it kind of a thing, right? Like that's like what they have to sell. It's like you can have an elite website without any skills. Like, that's an insane thing to say. And that I think people who are great at using Webflow can get you an elite website for a price that's probably like way less than it would be otherwise, right? And even with Squarespace, right? It's like the moment you step outside of the line, you got yourself a problem. You need to be a dev again, right? WordPress, very similar, right? Like, guess what? You need to know PHP if you want to really do some damage in WordPress that isn't just the template. But to just kind of circle back to my coming in hot on topic specifically, is like, you do have to have an open mind to move from something worse to something better. You do have to put in a couple hours of work to even leverage what the platform is great at. And I know we always try to help our clients with that, things like that, but those are the people that are going to have a hard time moving to Webflow, or frankly anything else. Like, you could zoom out into life points or philosophical things at this, but it's like, if you really want to get better and improve what you're doing, like, there's going to be a bit of a learning curve. It's up to you to decide if that's going to be worth it or not. But coming in and thinking, like, I'll just, pop in one day during an emergency and know exactly what to do, you won't. It's pretty straightforward. And I think, that's what really grinds my gears, if you will, on how they're billed, because sometimes it's like an unfair pitch to be like, anyone can do this. Right? Like, we've been working for years in Webflow to get as good at it as we are. You don't need to be that nerdy or obsessive about it or whatever, like we are to build a website, but to be really, really great at something or to be even good at something, I was like people should come in with their eyes open and they're going to get a great reward out of that process. But if you don't, and you really want to use the Yoast plugin on WordPress, and that's your be all end all, like we probably shouldn't be having a Webflow conversation, even though we can build what Yoast does into Webflow backend very easily, and there won't even be a subscription attached to it, right? But we'll have to talk about it and make sure that happens together and show you how it works. And if you just don't have the palette or the time or the desire to do that, then stay on the platform you know best. I think that's just good advice. But that's kind of like to that person, but also to like even Webflow or like the marketing of some of these products, right? Is like that you don't need to know anything.
Right. Yeah. I think the familiar isn't always better. It's definitely a big part there. Like you may be familiar with other platforms, which is great because like, you've already spent that time in there, but you have to remember too, that it took you time as well to get familiar with that. And it's just going to take time to get familiar with Webflow. Like you said, like we're in it like all day, every day. So obviously we know how to go navigate everywhere, what to do, all, shortcuts, things like that. If you're popping into Webflow 30 minutes a day to do one little thing, and then you got to try and do something else, like you're not going to know how to do it, because why would you? I mean, no one's going to, that should not be your expectation. So obviously it's going to be frustrating. And you got to be willing to like, deal with that growing pain for the greater good of what you want to do. Like, unless, and I think that's the other part of it too, where like, don't move to Webflow if you don't know why you're moving to Webflow. If it's just purely because of the name, like, oh, everyone else is moving to Webflow, so I want to move there. Like, don't do it. Like, it's not worth it. It's not worth that trouble, because I think we never said it, but a big part of like what we do is we want to use design and Webflow to solve business problems, and there needs to be a business case to move this website. If it's just purely because your competitor are doing it, it's like it's not going to serve any goal, because you didn't have a goal there to begin with. So make sure you have a good business reason to do this, because it's going to be a timely, costly, expensive process, whether you do it internally or you hire a couple clowns like us to do it for you. So another reason not to go to Webflow or do anything, quite honestly.
You might have gotten ahead of yourself. You might have just dropped some nugs of wisdom right there. I don't want to call it out, but when I see a good nug, I'm going to say it.
All right. Yeah. So let's use that tease there and go into our final segment, which is nugs.
That's what we call a segue in the business. We're not in the business, clearly, but.
So all right. So we got 2 nugs of wisdom for you all today. So starting with nug number 1. Give Webflow a shot. If you're not in there now, you haven't tried it yet, the great thing about it is that it's free to use. They only charge you when you actually launch a site. So you can just play around to your heart's desire in there. So go ahead, create an account, click the link below. It's our affiliate link. Just putting that out there, being transparent. It helps us make like 1/10 of a penny for every person who uses it. So we're not making bank on it. But go ahead and use it, create an account, mess around, and make a page and just see what it's like.
Yeah, and shameless plug of the day, which we hope is good wisdom as well, is if moving a whole website over is something that sounds overwhelming, it kind of is. If you don't do it every day, it kind of is. If you do, it's just a lot of work, especially if you have a legacy website or whatever that you want to move over. But that's something we've been seeing more and more lately, as people, like we mentioned an example earlier, just want to move to a new platform, right? Their site's heavy. It's not loading quickly. They're not able to do the things they want with their content management system, whatever it might be. Holler at us. Like, let's just chat. Like you can tell we're super aggressive salespeople, I'm sure from our vibes that we're putting out today, but really we're happy to have a conversation and just like let you know what might be a good thing to do, or say, hey, maybe take 6 months and get your content organized or whatever. Like, we're happy to have those conversations and just let you know our thoughts on your scenario and whether Webflow is a good fit for you and whether we're a good fit for you or whatever it might be. But it's good to start thinking about it now, even if it's down the road. Like, it's a big move, like we talked about. just a moment ago, an investment, right, of time. If you go into it with your eyes open, it can be a great experience, and you would come out the other side with a badass looking website for sure, but also one that just makes your day-to-day marketing tasks easier. One that sort of like hopefully reinvigorates your marketing and design team a little bit, just because we've taken that time to introduce what's possible. Everybody's had enough time to learn how they can leverage the platform. And then you can fire us. We talk about that all the time. You can just fire us because you actually can control most everything that you need to do on your website without us. And honestly, it sounds weird, but that's usually our goal. And that's why we like Webflow, because it's possible to get you to that point.
But I want to add on to like nug number 2 real quick by saying like you can equate you're creating a new website like building a new house. You can say like, I want to build a new house, but there's a lot that goes into it, a lot that you can see and a lot that you don't see. And there's a lot in building a website that you don't see that can make the process a living hell. And we know this because literally one of our first things that we ask like new leads is looking at your sitemap. You have so many pages, these number of pages. Do you want to build all of these? And I don't think we've ever had anyone say like, not say some version of, oh, didn't realize we had that many pages. I mean, that is a telltale sign to show you how much detail and how much work is related to this. It's just simply just hitting publish on a new site. Like there's a lot of thought that needs to be put into this, and it's overwhelming. Like we're not just saying that to scare you, but just to kind of show the seriousness of it. Of like you're seriously thinking about this, and you have to take it seriously. And like we said, we don't take much seriously other than Webflow and building websites. And so when we give you this fair warning, we are being really serious about it. Is that it's a lot of work. You can ultimately like be happy at the end of this, or like pretty much on your deathbed, because it can put some gray hairs and white hairs in your head. So definitely holler at us if you are thinking about it but are somewhat overwhelmed by it, and we're happy to chat. And with that said, that's it. Episode number 1 is in the can. We are done. Wrap it.
Absolutely. Another banger dropped. Like probably That's probably a Grammy winner.
Oh yeah.
If I had so check us out, nominate us over on the Grammy Award website.
Yeah. If there's like a digital time capsule, this is something that we should save for future humanity, for people to be able to look back and say like, what was 2023 like? What was life like back then?
That year?
Yeah. This happened. Nothing else mattered but this.
That's all I really remember from that whole year.
So for all of you who are still listening to us and watching us talk, you made it to the very freaking end. So that means either 2 things. You got lazy or busy with something and totally forgot to turn this video off, or the more likely scenario is you absolutely freaking loved it and you want to see more of this. So go ahead and give us a like, subscribe, so you make sure you get new content. We're going to be rolling out more content all the time. Not only videos like this, but we're going to be rolling out a new series as well called Styling and Profiling, where we're going to give you tips and tricks on how to, get the most out of your Webflow site. So look out for those. But yeah, just do it. Subscribe, sign up.
Yes.
Fade to black.